Hello
Hello there.
there. Welcome back to another episode to the return of Star Wars in a Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Eli,
I'm Jacob.
and we are back for the first time in a little over a month. We are back. We are officially starting season 11 of Star Wars in a Galaxy, episode 85. And we are finally doing it after months of teasing we were going to do it. The Bad Batch show is here. We watched the first premiere episode, the 70-minute premiere episode of The Bad Batch Aftermath today, and we're gonna talk about it. I'm so excited to get into this. I'm so excited to be back. Jake, you got anything to say before we go on with Aftermath and stuff like that?
No, it's been a while for sure. I'm very excited to be back. Lot of changes going on in both our lives, but we're here, we're ready to go, shaking off the cobwebs, getting back into it. I'm super excited. Very excited to rewatch The Bad Batch because I haven't rewatched a lot of it since it came out. And this was definitely one of the shows that had more mixed feelings on. So I think it's going to be really interesting to unpack that as the season progresses.
100%. I actually agree with a lot of your mixed feelings. And I like The Bad Batch has been an interesting show for me in the past because it is in the style of so much that I like, yet its heights have not been reached. But I actually got to say, upon just this rewatch of Aftermath, I'm liking it more than I did. Like, Aftermath is a damn good episode, and there are some other damn good episodes in this season. Not all of them are like as top notch as Aftermath, but Aftermath is definitely fantastic, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
oh yeah, absolutely. This one is not like there were a couple moments where I kind of had some gripes, but absolutely, I think when it comes to the Filoni, the Rebels, Clone Wars, Bad Batch, the Filoni animated side of Star Wars, the big moments, the um the keystone moments, if you will, are never in doubt. I think where it drags, especially for the Bad Batch, is kind of stringing those together and finding a way to make it compelling for all of the episodes that aren't a big galaxy defining event or a big reveal or a big reuniting. What do you do with those times and those moments in between? And I think that's kind of the big question mark for me as I rewatch, is kind of looking to see how the show handles that and how I experience that, with the knowledge that we now have, going into, gosh, it's season 2, yeah, coming out super soon, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That speaking of season 2, I'm going to mention that this is the first thing we've covered on In a Galaxy, other than Visions technically, but like Visions is a bit different because it's not like a chronological piece of storytelling. But this is the first thing of In a Galaxy that we're watching that isn't complete yet. The show isn't done. Season 2, episode 1 will be releasing the 2-episode premiere on January 4th, 2023. And we don't know if there's going to be 2 seasons. We don't know if there's going to be more. We don't know the fates of any of these characters, of the main characters, the 6 main characters at least. We know the fates of like some other characters that'll pop up here and there, Rex, Hera, Kanan, and blah blah blah. But we don't know the fates of the Batch, any of the 5 of them, or Omega. And it's really interesting watching this as a rewatch, yet still not knowing what happens because we don't have all the answers. We can't say, oh, this is what this means in the trajectory of their entire story, because we don't have their entire story yet. So we usually intend for In a Galaxy to be like a sort of timeless thing. And this season is going to be a little less timeless because we just don't know what's going to happen. Bad Batch season 2, we've seen the trailers. We know, for example, that Gunji's coming. We know that Commander Cody is going to be in season 2. We know all those things, but there are just some things we don't know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think one of the things that what you said made me think of is that so much of Star Wars, and this is not to its detriment, for the most part. So much of Star Wars now is filling in the in-betweens. It's, we know this character's here, and then we know they pop up here 20 years later. How do we fill that in a way that is still interesting and compelling? And I think there are a lot of ways to do that, because, you know, whether a character lives or dies is far from the be all end all of giving them an interesting story. But it's still really refreshing to actually see a cast of characters who, for the most part, you're genuinely wondering about every episode.
Yeah, they could die 2 years after the show takes place. All of them, they could. They could also all live past Exegol.
We just don't know yet.
We just don't
really
know.
Interesting to see.
I mean, they probably wouldn't live past Exegol minus Omega because of the accelerated aging, but like, you know,
The point stands.
the point stands. Yeah. But no, do we want to do the summary? Who wants the summary? Do you want me to do the summary? Do you want to do the
Yeah,
summary?
you do the summary for this one. You take this one.
In Aftermath, the Bad Batch intervenes in a Clone Wars battle on the planet of Color, saving the day after clone forces after droid forces have pinned down Commander Gray and his commanding officers, Jedi Master Depa Billaba and her Padawan Kanan Jarrus. Suddenly, Order 66 is executed. The Batch minus Crosshair try to protect the young Kanan Jarrus, I think I called him. His actual name at that point, of course, would be Caleb Doom. They try to protect young Caleb from the clones, but he manages to escape from their grasp due to jumping over a waterfall. They return back to Camino to see that things are changing rapidly. The clones are acting a little strange, and the Republic has now been transformed into this thing called the Galactic Empire. And they're trying to figure out what to do when Wrecker inadvertently starts a food fight in the cafeteria, which gains the attention of the newly promoted Admiral Wilhuff Tarkin. Tarkin calls them in to see how they train and how they fight, because he's questioning the ability of clone soldiers as opposed to recruitment soldiers. Something that we will eventually find out in future episodes will become known as Project War Mantle. And Tarkin then, to test their loyalty, or so he says, sends them to the planet Onderon to dispatch, he said, separatist insurgents, but they figured out very quickly that it is actually forces led by the former Republic fighter Saw Gerrera and the newly formed Partisans. They refuse to wipe out the Partisans, but an Imperial probe droid spots them. Tarkin arrests them on charges of treason. They figure out that the inhibitor chips never activated in the batch, minus Crosshair, whose brain structure actually did allow for the inhibitor chip to act somewhat. They turn Crosshair's inhibitor chip up to 11. The rest of the batch meets a young clone named Omega, who is another genetically modified clone. And they try to get her to safety and escape. Crosshair tries to stop them, but he is unable to stop them, and they take off in their ship, the Havoc Marauder, headed to Sector J19, which we will learn in the next episode is the planet of Seleucamine. Jacob, what's our fortune cookie for this episode?
That would be a trick question.
I almost got you there.
For the first time in a very, very long time. Oh, minus us doing visions.
And
there
Siege.
Is
but
no
yeah.
fortune cookie.
Yeah, and Siege. But yeah. We
NCH,
do
true,
open
true.
with an opening narration though, which I love. This is the only Bad Batch episode ever to open with a Tom Kane opening narration, which is fantastic.
I think it's a great way to transition, kind of paint that transition between the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch.
Yeah, absolutely. You stole the words right out of my mouth, actually. That's exactly what I was gonna say. It creates that very smooth transition where we start in the Clone Wars and we end the season, bit of spoilers, but we end the season with the Empire. We start with Republic, we end with the Empire is very much a good thematic journey for the season to go on. And yeah, it's I will say this. I want to call back to this, and I will go back and listen to this episode. Um and I'm not going to try and give myself too much credit. But do you remember Star Wars in a Galaxy episode 57, Tragedy on Umbara with Nessa?
Before we go any further, I actually have to talk about the logo too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I maybe I read into this a little bit too much, but I absolutely loved that one shot, the Clone Wars logo. We see it turning into the Bad Batch logo, that clean, clear cut, high contrast, the familiar nostalgia, all of it quite literally burning away to reveal the messy, gritty Bad Batch logo, all its different shades of color. I think absolutely perfectly mirroring how kind of the black and white world, the binary of good and evil, that the great illusion that all the Jedi and the Republic kind of was placed under by Sidious, that all kind of comes burning down, and out of it comes this whole new world of confusion and of moral ambiguity and not knowing what the heck is going on. And I think it's just a great little way of kind of showing that, and showing how everything that these characters thought was real and right and wrong is literally going up in flames and is literally just disintegrating in front of them. Like
Couldn't have
none of
said
it
it.
was real whatsoever.
Couldn't have
And
said it
it's an
better
amazing way
myself.
to show that.
That's literally what I said myself. Seeing literally my notes say seeing the Clone Wars logo get burned into the Bad Batch logo is so aesthetically cool and really sets the tone before the series we're about to watch. That's literally what my note
Yeah.
says.
There you
Again,
go.
we're in lockstep on this. Yeah, the old era is over. Any rules that you thought were pre-established about the old era of the Clone Wars, good versus evil, Jedi versus Sith, Separatists versus Republic, is gone. What we have now is the Empire and people standing up against it. And those are the two sides. And right now, resistance to the Empire at this time period is extremely minimal for the most part. We don't see it much. We haven't gotten a lot of post like just after Sith era stuff. Bad Batch is really it.
True.
And I mean, Fallen Order is the next closest thing, but even that's 5 years later. This can't take more than a few months this season. So we got years to go, and we know that the Bad Batch season 2 will undergo a time jump. We don't know how much. But again, it's a rapidly changing galaxy, and there's that line from Saw Gerrera, and Saw, love him, delivers the thesis statement of the show. You can either adapt and survive or die with the past. That is Saw spelling out the show. That is the main theme of the show. You can either
absolutely.
adapt, you can either adapt and survive or die with the past. And we're going to see in this season, and I'm excited to see this more in the second season, how the Bad Batch does this, what their role is in a galaxy that no longer needs them and seemingly no longer wants them.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it. It's
Yeah.
it's gonna be I think it's gonna be fascinating to see the conundrum that is always kind of hinted at um in a lot of the later Clone Wars episodes. Never really something that's been explored before in a movie, in a TV show. I can't say I know of every single comic and novel out there. I'm sure there's at least something, that touches on this topic, but it's going to be interesting to see for sure what they put out into the main line.
Absolutely. And on that note, should we get into the actual meat and potatoes of the episode?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
I feel like I want to start with the conversation about retcons because
Okay.
this was gonna come up eventually. And yeah, I'm talking about the Bad Batch aftermath and the Kanan the Last Padawan comic.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of controversy about the beginning of this episode on the internet because this episode displays slightly different details about how Order 66 was executed on Collar and the subsequent actions than was in the Kanan the Last Padawan comic. I know many loved that comic and what it had to say, and some were disappointed as to what the Bad Batch as a show could be erasing by rendering that as non-existent. First of all, I want to just put this out there. I have not read Kanan the Last Padawan. I know what happens in it, and it is my personal opinion that this retconning doesn't really matter. I completely understand if others disagree, but for me, it's about Ken Knapsack, Force Center, has this great term called emotional canon, where it's not exactly about it's not the continuity. It's not about A happens then B happens then C. It's about what the stories say about the characters, and both stories, even though they have some slightly different plot details, give the same message about Kanan. There's nothing that really changes about Kanan's story from Aftermath to Kanan the Last Padawan or vice versa. And that's why it doesn't bother me as much. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
My opinion, I read Kanan the Last Padawan. I read it years ago. I think it's an incredible comic. I really enjoyed it. But beyond looking at the content itself, I think perhaps why many people were upset by it is more, I think in general, the precedent that it sets or that it could set. I think is an upsetting one for me and unsettling, and could be for a lot of people. Um, I'm just kind of speculating since I wasn't really apprised of the controversy or the exact details. But I think just whenever you get the sense, Star Wars is something that's so personal, and so so important, so emotional for so many people. Whenever you get the sense that Lucasfilm or whoever it is, the creators, whenever you get the sense that they aren't taking outside of story decisions, completely outside of story decisions, whenever you get the sense of, they're not taking the care that they should, or that they think, or that they have decided that they are willing to kind of, you could see it potentially as kind of trampling over, some pre-existing media. I think I understand. I found that very upsetting at times, and I understand why why a lot of people um kind of hold that feeling as well, especially when I think I find it very upsetting personally when it seems to conform to this kind of hierarchy of media. You know, there's a lot of moments in which the live action shows seemingly in their creative decisions with pre-existing characters seemingly are saying, "Oh, we don't really feel the need to be we don't really feel the need to kind of be consistent, or not even consistent, but be plausible with with drawing lines to where it was before." um sorry, let me rephrase that. Sorry, I'm trying to I'm trying to say this the right way. I think, you see that in live action, kind of sometimes maybe the creators not taking as much care as they should, depending on how you feel about it, to make the characters feel like they line up with, how they were in animation, how they were in comics. And one must think, well, why is that? And one of the explanations seems to be a general feeling that because live action is like higher up on this perceived hierarchy, that it doesn't really have to take care when treating things that were introduced in in animation or in books. And then I think when you see animation do the same thing to books and to comics, I think when you start to see that pattern, I can understand why people are upset, because I think one such media, it may be seen by more people, but it's not intrinsically more valuable. And I think that it sets a very bad precedent, to kind of for these higher up the hierarchy, so to speak, media to be able to kind of roll over and play fast and loose with things from lower hierarchy. That being said, also outside of that, I think people had many gripes just about like, oh, they should have been more careful. And understand that too.
And I understand that, and I agree, and I understand where you're coming from with a lot of that, even if I don't necessarily agree with a lot of it. I will say that I think people pointed out that happened, and I'm not saying you were doing this, but I think people point that out happening more like it happens more often than it does. It has
Mm,
happened maybe 4 or 5 times in the last 8, 9 years of canon.
yeah, it's not a
it's
common occurrence.
it's not a common occurrence, and I see many people acting like it's more common than it is. Uh and and not to say that again, I strongly believe that the story is more important than the canon. Uh but B, that canon, should to a certain respect to a certain amount be respected, and I don't think this too grievously violates anything. Again, people can tell the same stories from different perspectives, and details can be slightly, tweaked here and there, and they can still both be accurate. But I understand where people are coming from when they're disappointed. Moving on though, how great was it to see Freddie Prinze Jr. back as Caleb Doom, or I guess our first canon appearance on In a Galaxy of Caleb Doom?
It was amazing. It was really great. I thought it was really heartwarming to be able to see a little Kanan or little Caleb, as a young Padawan, doing his thing before everything happens, seeing his mannerisms, knowing what he's gonna become, knowing who he's gonna become. It's a really heartwarming moment, to be sure. On the other hand, I also just kind of thought, wow, he has a really, really deep voice for such a young teenager. My goodness.
Yeah,
That was one of my thoughts as well.
I know a lot of people said that. I also I remember
That's like
hearing
a
a lot of
non-issue, though, to
complaints.
be honest.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lot of complaints on the issue of like, oh, why did it have to be Kanan? Why couldn't it be some other Jedi? I'm like, Shut the fuck up. It's Kanan Jarrus, okay?
Because it's cool. Because
Because
like
Kanan's a character that we know, and seeing the death of his master Depa as described to us in I think it's Call to Action is the one it's described to us in. And
when
having that
the Grand Inquisitor is, you know, interrogating him, he says, "What was her last words to you?"
to run, and
Yeah,
that scene automatically flashed to my mind when I
yeah,
was
like
watching this. It's brutal to witness.
yeah,
How many
it is
times have we
absolutely brilliant.
witnessed Order 66 so far, by the way? I think this is up to 3 now.
Yeah, it's really cool that they're starting to lean into showing us the same moment from multiple perspectives in one medium. I think that's
Yeah.
really cool what they're doing. I also think, you know, what's brilliant about the Kanan move is that, at least for me, being an avid Rebels fan, um, the first time I watched it, from the moment Kanan came on screen, from the moment even that I knew it was Depa Billaba, I was like on high alert for those last words. I was already thinking about, that scene way back from, gosh, 2014 or whatever it was released. That scene from the first season of Rebels in the interrogation chamber. I think it was an amazing touch.
Yeah, it is. It is. I love the Kanan scene. Um we can already see the Caleb slash Kanan. I know we keep bouncing back and forth. It's tough because he's called Caleb in this one episode, but he changed his name to Kanan between now and the start of Rebels. So that's interesting to say the least. Um, but I just love how like he still has like even this early on, he has that Caleb Kanan swagger. Like
He
there's
does.
he
Yeah.
has that, yeah, I'll do what I want when I want to, like at such a young age. And I love seeing the origins of the Kanan I know and love from Rebels uh in that. And I think it's quite a treat to see. But let's
Oh, yeah,
not talk about Kanan because this is
perfectly
not
said.
Kanan's show.
Perfectly said.
This is not Kanan's show. This is the Bad Batch's show. And let me tell you, the difference between the Batch in the arc and the show now is freaking night and day. Uh, I like the Batch in the show in the arc from TCW a lot, but the Batch in the show feel way more grounded and and like less caricature-y. Like I feel like we get, because of the amount of time we spend with all of them, I feel like we get to break them down as people and not just as, oh, I'm the sniper, and oh, I'm the strong man, and oh, I'm the, that those kind of archetypal roles. Um, I love seeing them
Yeah,
work together. Go ahead, sorry.
it's really, just to echo your sentiment, I think it's really nice to see them, move from being move into being real characters and not just like TF2, like TF2 support tank attacker like classes. You know what I mean? It's nice to see. They're not
Absolutely.
Battlefront classes anymore. They're actual characters, especially Crosshair. Especially Crosshair.
Absolutely. I love the Bad Batch working together. All of their ridiculous plans are so incredibly like you never think it's going to work, and then they execute it and it works. And I'm just left sitting there like they really just took out like maybe 150 battle droids with 5 people. It's
Yeah. And
remarkable.
yeah. And they really just did it in the most comical way possible as well.
Rolling the big snowball down the
Yeah.
hill and doing all their it's a joy to watch the Bad Batch fight together. It is one of the greatest, in my opinion, extensions of the whole teamwork makes the dream work theme in Star Wars. um
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
uh but uh yeah, we should get to those fateful 3 words: execute
Oh
Order
boy.
66.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
seeing seeing the clones in real time. This is the crazy thing too. In real time, go from the charismatic soldiers that we know from the Clone Wars to the automatons that they were fighting 10 minutes ago, as we've talked about extensively in season 10 when we were talking about Siege and Revenge of the Sith, is
yeah,
incredibly frightening, and especially from the Bad Batch's perspective, who are clones who are mostly not affected by these things.
yeah,
Seeing their fellow brothers turn like basically into different people is terrifying.
yeah. It's incredible, I think, especially this scene, the way that it was done. The tonal shift is so incredible. I think even before you hear execute Order 66. I mean, to be fair, it's easy for them to it's really easy for them to play this up big time. Because everybody knows what's going to happen and we're all kind of sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for it. But I think that doesn't take away from how well they did it, where even before you just like the clone trooper walks off. I can't remember the name of the commander.
I think it's Commander Gray, but I'm not sure about
Yeah,
that.
I don't know. The commander walks off, and even just before you, even just as he walks off, and you kind of hear that radio chatter in the background, like before the shot of Sidious or anything, just that radio chatter, it sucks all the oxygen out of the scene, all the air gone in an instant. It's amazing. I think one thing I noticed this time is that you can actually see even before Order 66, you have that little radio static, and then we just get this shot of Depa Bilaba's face, and she just subtly, subtly, subtly runs through the entire spectrum of emotions, goes through this entire process of grieving and shock and comprehension, um, and dawning dread, um, and deep sadness, just in that one moment, I assume, through the force, some the unifying force, precognition, a little bit of those things kind of giving her a glimpse. But just in that one moment, disturbance of the force, whatever it is, just the tension rises and rises, and we just see her kind of comprehend. The way I read it was kind of in that one moment, she is comprehending everything as the clone's getting the order. We see her face, we see her go, oh shit. Like the clones are not on our side.
It,
Like this entire thing is like nothing is real. The entire Jedi Order has been duped. We've been led astray. And now we're about to be burned to the ground. And none of us will be around to stop the most horrible evil imaginable from spreading across the entire galaxy. And you just see that wash over her for 1 second. And then it goes execute Order 66, and all that tension snaps. And gosh, oh my gosh, it is incredible.
it
Absolutely incredible.
really, really, really love it. I want to give a shout out to give me a second. I want to give a shout out to Archie Punjabi, who voiced Depa in this episode. Like again, this was her first Star Wars role. She was in this for like 10 minutes at the most. And she acted exactly like I thought Depa Bilaba would act.
Yeah, she did.
And I
Good
love
shit.
that. Um, but yeah, what do you want to go to next?
I don't know. I mean, where can you go after that moment? I can't remember. I've already raved about that in other episodes. I can't remember exactly why. It's hard to pass up an opportunity to rave about that moment because there's so much to talk about in this Bad Batch Order 66 scene. But I think the shows do a good job of portraying those moments, when the entire the entire universe kind of shifts on its axis, you know, these huge moments. That's something that they do very well. And this is
Absolutely.
no exception. And I think the tonality, the atmosphere that they evoke is really good. And I think I was really struck by that as, you know, you're watching them chase Kanan, and you're still kind of, you know, watching them be rocked by this revelation, you know, trying to, you know, on the ground in the moment, trying to pick up the pieces, trying to piece together what the shit just happened. Like, why did these clones shoot the Jedi dead all of a sudden? You know,
Yeah.
it's slowly sinking in. That's something that I absolutely cannot get enough of. Um, you know, like when they're talking about in, you know, they're talking about, oh, there's this, you know, the Order 66, you know, the directive is going through the encrypted comms. It says to execute the Jedi. Oh, which Jedi? Like that one line, which Jedi? All of them. Like absolute goosebumps. Absolute goosebumps.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and you know, it is this galaxy changing event. Um, it is this galaxy altering event, and to see it treated with such gravity is only appropriate. Um, I feel like we need to get into good soldiers follow orders
We
because
do. We do. Yes, we
Crosshair
do.
is that rings through his head the entire episode, and he says it quite a few times. And I feel like we got to talk about like Crosshair's betrayal.
Yeah.
I think I had predicted or heard some rumors of Crosshair's betrayal before the show came out. And I have to admit, the plot point was a bit predictable, in my opinion. Like,
Yeah, I think
oh
if
no, the guy who was dickish to everyone turned out to be a massive asshole.
yeah, I think if you polled people before the start of the Bad Batch and said one of basically the like who is the imposter, like who is gonna which one is gonna turn on the others and betray them, or from Crosshair's perspective, they all betray him. I think 90% of people or more would have said, yeah, it's gonna be Crosshair.
Yeah. And again, here's the thing. It would have bothered me more if it wasn't so damn well executed.
Yeah.
Because he
Like,
doesn't go from 0 to 100 like all at once.
yeah, it slowly builds throughout the episode. Like
Yeah.
it makes it, you know, you see the resentment that he has towards Hunter, you know, the tension, you know, each action kind of building up until he finally snaps. He's like, you've gone soft. What the hell are you doing? And it kind of, yeah, exactly. It slowly builds up.
Yeah. It is this incredible build, and that's what I like about this episode so much is that it could have taken the easy way out. It could have had Crosshair go from 0 to 100 like that, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It made the story believable. And again, I also love the theme of, you know, uh to quote uh to quote the great Scott Steiner in one of his WWE promos, the Bad Batch are genetic freaks and they're not normal. Uh and because of that, because of their abnormality as soldiers in general, it makes sense that their fates would also be abnormal. You know, they're not taking the conventional path during the War of Many Clones, so it only makes sense as to why they're not taking the same path after the war
Yeah.
as many clones.
Very much agree. Very much agree.
Um, I really quite like that too. Um, and do we want to go back to Camino?
Yeah, they return to Camino.
Yeah.
Not much for me to say. I think one line that stuck out to me, they're approaching, like, oh, we need a clearance code. Clearance code? Don't they know who we are? I'll take verbal irony for 500.
Yeah,
Um,
it is the first marker of what's changed there.
yeah,
Um,
it's
and
pretty, yeah, on the head.
and I love as we're entering the heart of darkness on Camino, like as we're entering the biggest Imperial period yet, what crosses the Bad Batch's path?
Oh, such a good moment. Such a good moment. Yes. Depa Balaba's, I believe it is Depa Balaba.
That's actually not what I was talking
Looking
about.
not what you were talking about. Okay,
No.
what were you talking about? What were you referring to?
As they enter into the heart of darkness, what crosses their path? An absolute beacon of light. Omega.
Oh, yes, of course. Of course, of
It,
course, of course.
it,
Omega.
yeah, I love her. Like, I really do. I want to give her a hug and tell her everything's gonna be okay. She is my sweet summer child. And I love Omega, and she is one of the most endearing and adorable Star Wars characters I think of all time. And props to Michelle Ong for making her just that extremely likable. I will admit that when the show got announced, I was like, "That's cool. They're adopting a young little girl. That's interesting." And now Omega for me is the if anything happens to her, I will kill everyone in this room and then myself. Uh,
Okay. Pulling no punches.
yeah.
Omega, that
Yeah,
kind of
Michelle Ong
character.
did a fantastic job. Jennifer Corbett and the writing team did a fantastic job at making her so incredibly likable. And I love that there is this innocence in her that in such a dark age, in such a brooding, gritty age, reminds them constantly, it's about what they're fighting for. It's about who they're fighting for. It's about the future that they could have should they win.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually saw at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim, I actually saw Michelle Long talk for a bit on one of the stages. I can't remember which. It wasn't one any of the panels or anything, just an interview. But yeah, like definitely, big ups to her. I think, hearing her talk, it's really clear. It's really clear, she's done her homework. And she's really I was just really impressed by the level of kind of focus and the sense that she was really bringing it to this role. You know what I mean? In the way that she talked about it, in the way that she talked about, her prep work, what went into it, what it means for her. It really just made me go, man, like I'm kind of blown away, and just wish all the best for her and for Omega as well.
Absolutely. No, Omega, I think this episode does one of the best character studies of Omega because she seems to be incredibly perceptive.
Oh yeah,
She
she is.
seems to
Absolutely.
pick up on things, social cues, and all of that kind of stuff. When she warns Hunter and the Batch of about Tarkin and his ill-informed intentions. I also love her like looking up to the Batch. There's that line, where is it? There's that line, when in the cafeteria, you want to sit with us? That's never happened before. Which is all at once totally believable and yet incredibly sad. And again, we'll get to the food fight later, but that is one of the biggest themes of the show, other than the whole adapt and survive or die with the past, is homogeny versus individuality, going with the group think,
Yeah.
or choosing or forging your own path with your own ideals and not subscribing to some higher ideal because that's what you're supposed to do. Speaking of that idea, I want to go to the freaking the projection of Palpatine's speech to the Senate, to the clones, which
yes,
reads to me like like a space version of the Nuremberg rallies. Like, this is a fascist leader riling up his greatest supporters, and there's nothing else to it. It's horrifying to see them like cheering along. There's that great line from Tech, which I think is one of my favorites in the episode. Still don't think the regs are programmed, as they're like cheering for blatant fascism and just lies. And it is incredible to me, the tragedy of that moment, the horror of that moment, how well it is captured. And then Kevin Kiner
100%.
comes in with an arrangement of the Imperial March, and in Kiner we trust, because he comes in clutch.
He oh my gosh, he knocked it out of the park in this episode. I'll get to it later when the time is right, but yeah, music rant incoming, because he knocked it out of the park on this one.
Absolutely.
He really did.
When a little later, when they land on Onderon, they play the Onderon motif from the Onderon arc in season 5. They did not have to do that, but they did anyway, and that's major props to Kiner and the music team. But you want to talk about Tarkin?
Yeah, man. I mean, Tarkin comes in, cool little moment. You can see at one point Echo kind of scowling after Tarkin, and if you remember, Echo, obviously part of the mission on Lola Sayu, the Citadel rescue, in which Tarkin was, to say the least, Tarkin was a royal pain in the ass for the Jedi, the clones, and especially Echo in that episode, since he kind of, his demands and his strategies kind of led to Echo getting blown up. Basically, Echo got blown up. So that was cool to see. But yeah, I mean, Tarkin, he comes in. It's pretty great, I think. The intrigue that kind of builds up with Tarkin, and is the Prime Minister Nala Se? Am I getting it right? I can never remember the
Nala Se is
Kaminoan
the
names.
scientist.
Lama
Lama
Su.
Su is the Lama Su is the Prime Minister. Yeah.
We have that intrigue with Lama Su and Tarkin. The negotiations, all that. I mean, Tarkin, he's so petty. It's hilarious. Your contracts with the Republic, like they're no longer eligible. The Republic no longer exists, when Lama Su points out that they're still under contract. That's like a I don't know. That's a crazy geopolitical move. Just be like, we're different now. We can't pay your debts.
It is absolutely nuts. And I will say that Tarkin's just like blunt cruelty is great symbolism of how the Empire is different from the Republic. It's how it's going to the Citadel challenge in the training module room, when he's like, hey, so you're gonna use live rounds on these clones, and they're like, we can't do that. And then he's like, and he's like, yeah, you can, and you will. So like, just fuck you if you disagree. And we talked a little bit about the food fight a little bit. Again, it's that homogeny versus independent thinking, conforming versus forging your own true path. Do you want
Yeah,
to talk about
and
Onderon
to
now?
that,
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
just to the food fight end, I noticed in that moment, from Order 66 on, I don't think you see a single clone who isn't either the standard white armor or a shock trooper
Yeah,
or the
absolutely.
Bad
They're
Batch.
becoming
So obviously that is signaling, sorry, as you said, signaling, yeah, they're becoming automatons, as you said. Food fight. This is one of those moments where, yeah, sure, I see it, but at the same time, like, interesting choice, I mean, witnessing Omega shamelessly instigating is pretty funny. And then why does Hunter of all people, why is he the first one to just kind of swing on a random clone trooper and knock him out when no one was going for him? It's very funny.
It's not really him. Wrecker throws the tray first.
Yeah, that's true.
But no, I get your point. It instigates pretty quickly, and the fact that there's no real punishments for any of them is a really strange thing, but okay.
Yeah, they just like make an absolute mess of the cafeteria, and everyone's just like, oh, that god dang Bad Batch. Oh
you know what
no,
I gotta say to that?
that
Oh
gosh darn
no.
Bad Batch.
Anyway,
Yeah,
is
exactly.
it is the perfect personification of the "oh no" anyway meme. Let's get to Saw Gerrera and Onderon. What I love about this campaign, what I love about the Onderon campaign, I love that he says it's about. I love that Tarkin says that the Onderon thing is about testing their loyalty, but it's really just about testing how like blindly they will follow orders.
Yeah,
It's
testing
about
their loyalty.
indoctrination.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not
it's
about
Tarkin's idea of loyalty, which is very warped. It's a
yeah.
very warped imperial idea of loyalty,
Yeah.
which is
I mean, he straight up lies to them
unquestioning.
and then
Yeah.
sends like fucking probe droids to make sure they do the job exactly how he wants them to do it.
Yeah, after they see children and civilians huddling for warmth in this camp, and
yeah.
he expects them to. No, it's crazy. Yeah, it's absolutely wild. And then you have Crosshair, literally has an old lady in his sights, and we see that shot as he says, give the order to Hunter.
And I'm just like, no, I'm not like a fucking monster.
Yeah.
Uh
And this is where the Saw quote is from as well, right?
yeah, adapt and survive or die with the past. There are also two other great Saw quotes here. Times change, targets change.
That's a good one.
I also like when he reveals that the Empire was lying to them. He goes, makes you wonder what else they're lying about, which is quintessential Saw Gerrera.
That
And I
is
really like
quintessential Saw Gerrera.
and I really like this version of Saw for a bunch of reasons. First of all, who voices Saw in this episode?
I can't remember his name, but I know it's the original Saw voice actor.
Indeed, his name is Andrew Kashino. I think his username is at Big Kish on Twitter. I can check that out. Yeah, big_Kish on Twitter. He is fantastic as Saw both in season 5 and in the Bad Batch, and I love that that for this era they didn't just do Forrest Whitaker, because Forrest Whitaker had been in Rebels, Rogue One, and Fallen Order before this, but they're like, no, at this point in time he's going to sound more like Andrew Kashino, and we're not getting the famous Oscar nominated actor Forrest Whitaker. But we're getting Andrew Kashino because at the time he sounds like Andrew Kashino. It's not like, oh, he really sounds like Forrest Whitaker. It's like, no, at this time he sounds like this guy, and at this time he sounds like this guy. And that is I really love that about Star Wars. You know, it's like I think it's doing the same thing with Ashley Eckstein with Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they could have replaced her with Rosario, but they didn't.
And thank you for not replacing in both cases. You know, I think it's good that even after there is live action, you know, they still kind of give the animation, you know, give it its respect, give it its flowers, give it, you know,
Yeah.
give it that continued presence. But I want to go back to this. I think the Saw quote. I just thought it was hilarious. You know, Saw is always that character who is, you know, he's kind of controversial. Um, you know, he's not always right about everything, but he always finds a way to say something that is like absolutely facts. And he may not always say it for the right context or in the right reason, but you know, in Rebels, you know, he's talking to Mon Mothma, you know, about her tactics, and he might be a bit of a dick sometimes, and he might be wrong about a great many things, but he always finds a way to spit some kind of facts in some sort of way or another. And I do love his character for that.
I do too, and I think Saw is in a really interesting point in his journey right now because notice that he offers the batch of choice. You know that adapt and survive or die with the past. I'm not
Yeah.
convinced that 15 years later Saw would offer the batch that same choice.
Me neither. I mean, it
I'm
remains to be seen, but
I that is at my evidence that there is at that point still good in him. That there is that at Saw's heart, and I believe that this is at Saw's heart throughout his life, but especially at that point, I believe like he wants to do the right thing. I believe he wants to. I believe at that point it's not just about fighting back against the Empire's tyranny; it's about making life better for people.
yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting to see that evolution of Saw Gerrera. No, but the adapt with or in survive or die with the past is just incredible, and it's just incredibly like of course it has to be Saw that says it.
Yeah,
And
of course.
but yeah, smaller conversation, but very important. We gotta talk about this. Where do you think Crosshair gets all of his toothpicks?
They must have an entire room on that shuttle of theirs dedicated to
Well, yeah,
Crosshair's
but now he
toothpicks.
defects from the batch, and he still like automatically just has toothpicks.
Maybe
It's
they're a standard issue Republic mess kit toothpick or something. I don't know.
I know, and like he's hoarding them or
Maybe he
something
has
like
his own
that.
personal maybe he has his own personal stash, you know.
Yeah,
Maybe one day in one of those. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Maybe one day in a reference book we'll see on his belt, you know. Um it'll be a Crosshair's utility belt, pouch for toothpicks or something like that. Reinforced Durasteel pocket for toothpick supply. You know, however they
Yeah,
say things.
yeah.
Look, if they can,
I'm imagining Hunter on the Havoc Marauder, and he's like, "Hey, Crosshair, we need to store some new weapons and some new armor." And Crosshair's like, "But my toothpicks."
yeah, if they can talk about if they can make a reference book that talks about Snoke's slippers and his robe, they can sure as heck talk about Crosshair's toothpicks. I guarantee it.
Hashtag create the toothpick verse. Hashtag restore the toothpick verse. Lucasfilm, you cowards, restore the toothpick verse. But I love that they go back for Omega. Again,
Yeah.
it's
No,
one
it's
of those
great. It's
things
great.
where
It's great.
they don't have to. There's literally no reason for them to. But they do it anyway. And it is that classic Star Wars. You know, you show up for your friends. You save what you love. You don't fight what you hate. To quote Rose Tico. Um. But it is great, and I also just love. I love the conversation that Omega has with Crosshair, where she says to him, "I know what you're going to do. Please don't do it. I understand where you're coming from, but it's not going to help anybody." And it is one of those perceptive moments from it is one of those perceptive moments from Omega, and how she knows what's running through his head, and she's trying to stop the train while it's still running.
Yeah, I was really fascinated, in that imprisonment, seeing the intrigue aspect of what does that mean for Omega's backstory, her character, that she seemingly knows about Order 66 and is in at the highest level. And I think that confused me as well. I can't remember who said it, if it was one of the Kaminoans. Was it one of the Bad Batch? Was it Tech maybe? But they basically referred to Order 66, or to the inhibitor chips, as general knowledge, which is shocking.
Tech
refers to it as general knowledge, which I need an explanation for. It's absolutely shocking, considering the lengths that Palpatine goes to. Why does he say it's general knowledge? Very
Tech
interesting.
says it's general knowledge to them, but he also says it's a running gag throughout the season where Tech says things that he assumes was general knowledge, and the others are like, "What the hell are you talking about?" I think Tech looked into some files and got into some research, maybe, and stuff he wasn't entirely supposed to be in. But he's like, just assumes everybody does that.
Fair point.
But yeah, I got two more things for this episode. First one, the animation, damn it.
My God, this animation. It's absolutely gorgeous.
The season 7 Bad Batch animation hits the spot, man. It really does. It really feels fantastic. It looks fantastic. It feels there's so many details and nuances, and I love it.
Yeah, I think this and season 7 of the Clone Wars really feel like a true apotheosis for this style of animation. For the Clone Wars art style, matures so much, it becomes so rich and beautiful that it kind of, if you look at the Clone Wars movie, if you look at where this is all started and then where it ends up, it's almost defying belief. It's pretty amazing. But going through the end of the episode, they take Crosshair, they examine him, they turn his inhibitor chip up to 11. The escape, Omega helps them escape. The clone troopers instantly go from, as you said, highly competent soldiers to clueless cannon fodder as soon as they are pitched against the Bad Batch. Was not something that I picked up on the first time I watched, but the music, Omega's music, is really, really good. That kind of high ethereal choral notes. I don't know, not something I'd really taken a notice to, but it really jumped out at me this time. It was like they were saying, hey, pay attention to Omega. She's really important. So I'm looking forward to season 2 quite a lot because of that. The hangar scene, oh my goodness, the hangar scene. First off, very small gripe. So you know how Echo, he has those big brain implants. They kind of go off his off the side of his skull, kind of. They go out wide, they go out back. And he has the helmet, which, his helmet fits around that and presumably, just interlocks with his brain implants. They very conveniently put him putting on his helmet behind Omega's head in a panning shot. I don't know how I noticed this. It's behind Omega's head when he puts it on, because if you actually look at it, there is no way to put it on that makes sense. The geometry all works. It all looks like it fits when it's together, but it just makes no sense whatsoever. It's hilarious.
Interesting. Very interesting. No, I did not notice that, I gotta say. But no, I love the Mexican standoff between Hunter and Crosshair is so incredibly metal. Like,
it's amazing.
It's one of those quotes, like, I believe Lawrence Kasdan said this while describing A New Hope. It moves like a son of a bitch. It really just does. It is one of those things where the tension's just ratcheting up until one of them is going to have to make the move that will define the next few minutes for them. And it is one of those things where seeing Crosshair turn against his brothers, his friends, his family, is the most heartbreaking stuff. And knowing how betrayed he is going to feel, and he already does feel about that, is heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. It's so good. It's so well done. And this is the moment that really made me, this hangar scene really kind of drove home for me how much I love the music of this episode. I think Kevin Kiner, hats off. He's done it once again, knocked it out of the park. 3 for 3 on Star Wars shows. Incredible soundtrack. The hangar scene, just what I think is so cool about it is that it picks up right where the Siege of Mandalore arc leaves off musically. It takes some of those moments musically from Order 66, the pulsating, clipped kind of bass. I don't know how to say it in technical terms the way that makes sense to people that really know music, but yeah, that just kind of wide, super gritty, pulsing bass thing that keeps going off in the scenes leading up to Order 66 and in the Bad Batch. The super kind of high, ethereal, ambient, mournful notes all the time. It's just so good. It's just so good that they take the Mandalore music, they take the Siege of Mandalore music, turn it into an entire soundtrack. It's absolutely freaking incredible, and I cannot get enough of it.
Absolutely, I love the soundtrack. Kiner's the GOAT. I love Kevin Kiner and his music, and just in general, this episode had so much to love about it. These Special Republic operatives going from where they're most comfortable to where they're least comfortable. Crosshair's turns to the dark side in quotes. Omega's first steps on her character journey. The new Empire. There's so much packed into the 70 minutes, and we could go on and on about it. But what are your final thoughts on this episode, Jacob?
Man, yeah, there's a lot more that we go into. My final thoughts, really, really strong episode. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it much more than I remembered enjoying it. I think the characters work really well together. They're not kind of hamstrung by the severe lack of depth and the severe caricaturage that they were hamstrung by in season 7 of the Clone Wars. There's a lot of intrigue. The animation is great, the music is great, all the tangibles are great. Yeah, I think it's really, really solid. Once again, like I said, for me, that question mark is just how does the show go throughout the season? Where was it going to end up? How is it going to get to, 20 seasons later? How is it going to get to the finale? How is it going to cover that space from point A to point B? That's the real question mark, but a really, really strong episode to start it off with. I was a huge fan of it rewatching it.
Absolutely. I love there's a lot to love about this episode. It is a very strong premiere. And the Bad Batch, I think we're going to discover, is an extremely strong show, and I think is underrated in a lot of ways. But I think that's going to be it for this episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy. Next week, we are going weekly. We're getting back to weekly recording. Next week, we're looking at 2 more episodes of the Bad Batch, Cut and Run and Replacements, episodes 2 and 3. That's episode 86 that'll be out next week.
So excited.
Those 2 episodes are fantastic. I love them both. Let me also say that I hope you all enjoyed Connor the One-Eyed Knight Shakiti versus Andrew the Grand Admiral Geha, Epic Confrontations 5. And I have an update for you about Epic Confrontation 6. We revealed that is the Imperial Senate Podcast of War. It is going to be coming sooner than all of us expected. It is going to be coming on October the 8th is our current plan. The October the 8th, we're recording on the 2nd, I believe it is. So look for Epic Confrontations 6, the Imperial Senate Podcast Civil War. There are a lot of fun surprises coming your way for that match and matches on Epic Confrontations beyond it on our YouTube channel, which is Star Wars in a Galaxy, which hosts all of our live YouTube content as well as our Epic Confrontations. But in the meantime, follow us on Twitter at In a Galaxy Pod, Instagram at Star Wars in a Galaxy. Our trivia account on Twitter is at In a Galaxy Trivia. My personal Twitter account is at Ochifan327. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We will be there for not. Email us, swinagalaxy@gmail.com. You can also email us with your hot takes, your trivia, your questions, your opinions, whatever you want to email us with. We'll read your stuff on the show. If you can leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it really does help with our visibility. And I think until next time, may the force be with you always.